Welcome back to Right on Four Corners. I'm your host, DelSheree Spinner. I am a USA Today bestselling author and high school English teacher. Currently, as we're recording this, on break and having fun catching up on some reading and chatting with authors. And I am excited to talk with Meredith Wargo today. We're going to be chatting about the book that she ghost wrote with Diane Troll and kind of telling that story. And the book is called Dogs, A True Story of Lost Animals and the Kids Who Rescued Them. So Meredith, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great. Well, thank you for hosting this podcast and for having me be on one of the episodes. I greatly appreciate it. I got a degree in journalism and spent most of my career in corporate America doing proposal writing, which is very technical writing. And although it was a nice way to make a living, it certainly wasn't satisfying my side to be a creative writer. So I started doing some freelancing on the side and kind of following the cliche to write about what you know and love. For me, it's animals and animal rescue. So I started writing a bunch of magazine articles on different topics, either animal health or focusing on different animal rescue groups and what they were accomplishing, in tough times. And anyway, that led to finally fulfilling my dream of wanting to become a published author and writing a book. And hence my first book called Dogs came out a couple of years ago, and it was a labor of love, but I'm glad I stuck with it.
Yes, it's a pretty amazing and fascinating story, and we'll get into that. I did want to point out for anyone who wants to look it up, it is spelled DAWGS, and that is an acronym. Can you tell us what the acronym is and just
Sure.
kind of what the book is about?
Okay. So DOG stands for Dalhart Animal Wellness Group and Sanctuary. Dalhart is a little town in the Texas Panhandle, and this book actually highlights the story of a fourth grade teacher named Diane Troll, who, along with her fourth grade students, started their own animal sanctuary. And for, 12 or 13 years, this group of children, along with Diane and Diane's family, kept the sanctuary afloat. And it was pretty challenging, not only from geographically where they were located, all kinds of horrendous weather to deal with, but there were a lot of people in the town, a very small town, about 5,000 people, who weren't in favor of rescuing animals and doing right by animals. So these kids faced a lot of challenges in trying to keep their sanctuary going. And when I say sanctuary, it wasn't just, a half dozen or so animals. These kids on a daily basis were caring for upwards to 500 animals a day. And that means after school, on the weekends, during summer break, Christmas vacation, these kids made it their passion and their commitment to make a difference for, all these animals under the tutelage of their teacher and Diane's family as well.
And I'm so impressed with the kids that they were willing to do this. I mean, I teach high school and I can't get most of my kids to read, 2 chapters of a book at home. We have to read it in class.
Right.
So I was like, wow, fourth graders being willing to, give up their time playing games and doing whatever their other interests are to actually come help these animals after school and on the weekends. That was pretty impressive to find young children who were that willing to dive in and spend a lot of time there. Pretty amazing.
And they basically stuck with it until they graduated high school. So it wasn't just like a one summer deal or, a one season deal. They were very committed. And I think what worked for this particular group of children, a lot of them came from broken families themselves. So I think to have a sanctuary of their own, Diane and her husband, Mark, were amazing people in terms of caring for the children, kind of giving them that family that they maybe weren't getting, at home. So I think it was just one of those kind of perfect storm scenarios where these kids needed, a chance to go and feel like they were making a difference, to be part of something big, and yet to be respected and loved by Diane and Mark. And obviously Diane and Mark relied on their help to keep the sanctuary running and, being able to be as successful as they were in saving so many animals over 12 or 13 years when they were working on this.
I think that's so important for kids, just to have a space where they feel safe and accepted. Because unfortunately, too many kids really don't have that in their lives these days for, a whole myriad reasons.
Right.
But that's amazing when those places can be created within communities where you're welcome, you're honored and valued, and your ideas as well. Because that was something with the book that I was surprised by was that, this group, the trolls and the children, like they want to do this helpful, good-hearted, in I think most everyone's eyes, like a very positive thing. And they really
Right.
faced some nastiness and some challenges from their own community that were telling them, like, no, this isn't a good idea. We don't value your beliefs and what you want to do. And outright just going against them and trying to make this as hard as possible. That was shocking to me. And I live in a county where we also have a huge homeless animal problem. And we don't have very many laws that require care. It's for our animals and, medical services and all of that. We have a lot of those same challenges. But in general, I think our community supports caring for animals and different programs like that. It's a lot of like cost issues. This is a very low income area. So there are challenges that make animal welfare difficult where I live. But
Right.
I was really surprised by the attitude of some of the community and then the city government itself in this town that they had to face. I was just like, what on earth?
Well, I think that's what was the biggest struggle for Diane. I mean, she was obviously trying to be a role model for these children, but yet having to figure out a way to counter the attitude that was mostly being driven by the city council members, I think. Yeah, granted, that Dalhart is a very farming, ranching community. So, they do look at animals a little bit differently than, saying, well, I'm going to do the right thing for my dog or my cat. I mean, they, use animals to make money, and that's kind of what they profit from it. So there is that mentality. But the mentality that Diane, kept running up against time and time again was that, she was teaching these kids evil things and that she was wrong to be trying to save animals. That was her biggest frustration. And to kind of temper that, so the kids didn't have to experience that necessarily, but to be aware that not everybody was in full support of what they were trying to achieve was, I think, probably her biggest hurdle during this whole time that she was, leading these kids and running the sanctuary.
Well, and what an amazing lesson for a lot of these kids to see that even when you're challenged that directly and you don't have community support for a particular idea or program or whatever it is, that someone is trying to accomplish, they didn't give up. They kept trying.
Right.
They found outside support and sources, especially financial, when they needed help purchasing supplies or equipment and things like that. What a lesson to learn as a young person, to see that, like, even against the odds that they face, they still found a way to do it and they persevered through it. And I feel like that's something I see so much with students who come into my classroom is like, the second it gets hard, they're done. They're out.
Yeah.
I can't do it. This isn't worth it. Nobody's going to help me, so I'm not even going to try. And that like defeatist mindset is so crippling for like long-term success just as a human trying to survive.
You're right, exactly. And I got to know these kids over the years, from the time that they were 10 years old till, after they graduated. And it's amazing how all of them, I don't think there's one that doesn't point to their time at the sanctuary and working with Diane and her family as to teaching them, right from wrong. And like you said, persevering. Just because, things get tough doesn't mean you can give up or walk away. And they fully credit their years working with Diane and the sanctuary as forming them as they are as adults now. And it's interesting, almost all the kids have gone on to have careers either in teaching or as nurses or in, senior care. So they've all chosen a career path where they are still giving back to the community. And they solely did credit Diane and what she taught them in all those formative years of saving animals and how it really can translate to other areas of their life. So I think, it's just an amazing life lesson that they were able to experience in really very harsh and difficult times.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because reading the book, I kind of had like two different takeaways that were competing with each other.
Okay.
It was like, there is like the inspiring side of it, everything that they accomplished and, just pushing through and finding a way. And then there was like the other side of just being like, why are there so many awful people in the world?
Yeah.
And I used to work at an animal shelter, so I saw some of these same things, as I was working there. And like there is an aspect of working in animal welfare that really hurts your belief in humanity as whole when you see how they treat animals and you're just like, oh my gosh, like you love the animals, but sometimes you really hate the people because,
Yes.
they drop a box of 2-day-old kittens outside the door in the middle of the night and, things like that. So it's like in telling this story, like you really see the extreme sides of humanity, of those who are willing to do what it takes to be a benefit and a positive force in their society. And then you see the harm that's caused by selfishness and limited perspective of, no, this is what I want and these are my goals. And I'm going to, fight for that over even considering someone else's viewpoint and the needs of the larger community. I thought that was a really interesting contrast to see as you were telling the story of Diane and these kids and everything that they went through.
Well, I mean, but what you just summed up is the reason why we have to have animal shelters and sanctuaries, because there are those in the population who don't respect animal life and care and doing the things they're supposed to do. Owning an animal is a commitment. It's a lifelong commitment. It's not just when they're cute puppies or kittens. It's the long haul. And I think, unfortunately, our society is a very disposable society. So when things get difficult or hard, or that little cute kitten or puppy grows up and it's not so cute anymore, well, I just want to get rid of it. And then it becomes someone else's problems. And as you well know, having worked in a sanctuary, I mean, these poor shelters and sanctuaries are overwhelmed. The staff and volunteers that give up so much of their time to do what they can for the animals, they're overwhelmed. And it's just a shame that we have so many facilities like that across the country. And it doesn't seem to be curbing people from wanting to still step up and do the right thing, which is kind of a hard concept to grasp, that this is our day and age of society, that people are just, not wanting to go for the long haul and doing what they're supposed to be doing for these helpless animals.
Yeah. I feel like especially lately and how the world is currently destroying itself was what it feels like. I feel like I'm
Yes.
constantly just asking myself, like, how has humanity and society as a whole, like, how have we not gotten better about, this or that or the other? Like, shouldn't we have learned these lessons by now? And we don't, unfortunately. Some people
Well,
do,
what's
and
scary
they
is
can
this
be that
isn't rocket.
force.
This isn't rocket science, though, either. These aren't
Mm,
difficult lessons to learn, but they might
mm,
as well be for the lack of progress that we seem to be making in this arena, which is just shocking to me too. I mean,
yeah.
thank God we have the people who want to, give up their life to rescue and, give up all their dreams of whatever it was just to save one more animal. But it's a sad commentary, I think, that, we are where we are. And I don't know how we get out of it. That's the hard thing too, or the harder question, I guess. This has become the norm. So how do you somehow flip that switch and get back on track and making caring for others, be it, four-legged or two-legged, the priority that it needs to be and should be?
Yeah. Well, and it's really interesting because I think so much of a lot of the current problems right now has to do with like being so narrow-minded in one perspective of like, this is how I see the world and how I think things should be, and just being unwilling to consider other options and perspectives. And I think that occurs like within animal welfare, where like in the town that I live in, I think over the decades, there's been a few attempts to have some municipal like animal licensing
Oh,
and,
okay.
requiring, updated shots and all of that. And currently, like the only thing they have limits per household on how many animals can be owned by a household, which nobody actually checks. So it's kind of like, not sure how effective that is. And I think the only other one that I'm really aware of is that to use the public dog parks, your dog needs to be vaccinated for rabies. None of the others.
Okay.
And again, like nobody actually is standing there regulating that. No one's asking for their rabies tag or anything. So it's really only enforced when a problem erupts. And anytime licensing or, requirements on spaying and neutering have ever come up in this community, they're shot down pretty immediately. And it seems to be kind of the thing of like, well, it's my animal. You can't tell me what to do with it. And like, I don't know, this just mindset of it's something that belongs to me and I should get to decide how I treat it and when I dispose of it and, things like that. And it just seems to be a mindset in this area that is really, really hard to change or expand or anything. And so we have just this huge problem here of homeless pets in the county that our shelter, and we have a pretty large comprehensive shelter. They have an on-site spay and neuter clinic with a full-time vet.
Okay.
And even still, like, I'm still in their foster group from when I worked there. And it is just constant. Like, we're out of room. We need people to come, foster animals. We need more supplies. We need this. It's just constant, like all year long. The number of animals is overwhelming. And the supplies that are needed to keep up with it is just like at certain times, like we would be out of supplies that we could give to fosters because there's like restrictions on what the budget can pay for and what has to be donated.
Okay.
And so it's just like all these like complicated factors of trying to do a good thing, saving animals and getting them into loving homes and spaying and neutering and vaccinating and all of that. And it's like even with a city government that supports the shelter, it is still just so hard to like keep up with that and to get people to understand like we could make this better. Like this could be a non-problem if we had more education and more responsibility toward pet ownership. And there's just this huge resistance to any of that. And it's just mind-boggling to me.
That is, I'm kind of surprised to hear that actually, because I always thought that where there weren't available programs like, low cost spay neuter, then I can see where that obviously would become a huge problem. But if the resources are available, that almost takes it to a different level if people aren't willing to do the right thing by their animal. I mean, spaying and neutering, hands down, is key to getting a handle on the homelessness of these animals. But if they don't like, quote unquote, being told how to take care of their animal, and yet the resources and the programs are there, how do you change that mindset then?
Yeah, it's a really hard one. Like I don't know. We haven't figured it out here in this community yet, but hopefully others are and it's improving.
Well, like I said, I don't think we would be in the situation of having so many shelters and sanctuaries overwhelmed with animals if people had figured it out by now. So it's an ongoing problem, I think, in every community, large and small. It doesn't matter what part of the country you live in, if you're in a big city or small town. This is a real problem.
Well, and I think books like this that show the real life experiences and the toll it takes and the resources that are needed and how there can be progress forward, I think is important because I think a lot of people, until they see an actual example of it in their face, it's easy to kind of pass it off of like, oh, well, that's probably not really going to work or not as effective or it's not that big of a problem. I think things like this of nonfiction true stories that really highlight the problems that exist and what it takes to try to work within that really can make a difference and can open people's eyes.
Well, I think, too, people who may want to get involved, they feel overwhelmed, too. They're like, well, how can my little whatever, volunteering, fostering, donating, going to make a difference at the end of the day? But it's the fact that if everybody had that mindset and just did what little bit they could do, it would make a huge improvement, and it would take a lot of the burden off the folks who run the shelters and the sanctuaries or those who volunteer their time just to have extra hands or a few extra dollars to be able to buy more food or blankets or whatever the need is at that moment. But I think some people, although they want to do well and do right and help out, they just don't. They feel overwhelmed and they're just over concerned that their little bit is not going to make a difference. So instead of getting involved on any level, they kind of like, well, somebody else can figure that out or deal with it, and hopefully it'll get better one day.
Yeah, just those small things, they really do add up and make a big difference. Hopefully this will help inspire people to take that little step. I liked the comment, I think it was toward the end of the book, where it was mentioned, even those families that sent, $10 a month, because that was what they had available. That does add up over the year, and it's greatly appreciated. Every little bit helps.
Yes. Yeah, Diane she was really extraordinary. She, like I think I highlighted in the book, she would write handwritten thank you notes to everybody who made a donation. So she was always trying to show her appreciation to those who were supporting the cause, but just wanted them to realize that every dollar was heartfelt, and it didn't matter if it was $10 or $100. And she felt an obligation and a desire to reach out to these people to just let them know how much their little bit did make a difference in doing what they were doing on a daily basis.
Yeah, that is pretty awesome. Well, and I wanted to ask you about your process of how you became aware of the dog's facility and program, and then how that led to you ghostwriting the book with Diane.
Well, I had come across a tiny little article about them in some animal related magazine. And at the time I was living in Texas, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I've never heard of this little, sanctuary. And I just wonder, what they're all about. So I started following them on social media and reaching out to Diane and kind of tossing the idea of, well, this is an amazing story. I'd like to maybe pursue writing a book about it. She's like, oh, well, no, we're not going to do that. I don't have time for that. And so I kind of backed off. And anyway, over the years, she and I developed a good friendship, and we are still great friends today. But I kept convincing her that this is a story that needs to get out there. This is pretty unusual model to have these children doing the hands-on work of what they were doing. And anyway, after I finally convinced her that, yes, we need to write this book, she relented. And I spent a lot of time. I would go up to Dalhart and stay with Diane's family and just hang out at the sanctuary. I got to know the children. Luckily, Diane had a lot of newspaper clippings and newsletters that she used to produce. So I had a lot of the backstory about what the early years were like. And just little by little, I started kind of inserting myself as Diane and writing this book. And it did take me 12 years because I also was working full time at the time, but we went through a lot of iterations of it. But it was really once Diane kind of realized that I was serious about this, she was 100% on board. Kids were 100% on board. And it really was a fun experience, although it did take me many, many years to get it done, but it was worth it. So it was just a lot of researching and getting to know the children and being part of their inner circle, so to speak.
And then that's something that's interesting about ghostwriting particularly, is whether it's fiction or nonfiction. On the fiction side, you're trying to match an author's style if you're kind of like stepping in, or if it's someone who has a story, but they, maybe just aren't a writer, but they want to share the story, of finding the right voice and tone for the project. And then in nonfiction, kind of similar, I would think, with like journalism. I worked in journalism for a while. Pay and the hours are terrible.
They are.
Especially for small town newspapers. But it's in a similar way, with journalism and then ghostwriting, like you're trying to capture a voice, and within that voice and feel of what you're talking about, like give solid information and share a story, whether it's, a 10-inch story or a full-length book. It's an interesting style of writing that kind of brings in this different layer of working with someone else's idea or voice and trying to capture those elements. What process did you go through on your side, and then in working with Diane, to kind of find the right feel and the right voice for how you wanted to tell the story in the book?
Well, I think that it helped that Diane and I had a friendship first for several years. So I really got to know her as a person. I would hear firsthand, the challenges, the frustrations, everything that was happening on a daily basis pretty much at the sanctuary. So it was easy for me to kind of assume what her life looked like, all the time. And then we actually, when we first came up with the idea, we thought we were going to write the book from the children's perspective. But then we quickly realized that because of Diane's caring for the kids, she did shield them from a lot of the stuff that was happening, especially on the financial side. The kids didn't know that a lot of times they had basically run out of money, and they were having to come up with creative ways to get food in or hay in for the barns or whatever. So we realized that trying to tell the book from the kids' perspective would be leaving out a lot of important things in what it takes to run a shelter. So then she wanted it to be written from my perspective, since I had been part of the group from a distance. But there too, it was like it sounded like I was doing journalistic reporting, and it just didn't have the heartfelt feel to it. So I kept after her and I said, Diane, this has got to be coming from your side of the world, because you're the one who's living it and breathing it. So once she accepted that, and then with my being able to spend a lot of time with her and her family and the kids, and because she had this amazing background of all these articles and newsletters, it was pretty easy for me to kind of assume her lifestyle and what she goes through. Now, granted, as I was writing it, she would be like, "Oh, no, that's not right," or, this, it didn't turn out this way. So there was a lot of that back and forth. But because she's a very open person, it was pretty easy to tell her story. And she was just grateful, I think, to have somebody else put it down on paper, and then she could kind of do the edits from that instead of trying to stare at a blank page and figure out what really needed to be put down initially.
Yeah, that's a big project if it's not something that you're used to doing, of figuring out where to
Yes.
start and how to structure it and put it all together.
Right.
So I'm glad you guys were able to partner on that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it was great. And truthfully, she's a very humble person. She really wanted the focus to be on the children the whole time. But I'm like, Diane, this sanctuary wouldn't be what it is today if it wasn't for your involvement also. So yes, we will
Mhm.
focus on the kids as much as we can, but you're pretty much the linchpin that is keeping this ship afloat. And it's, we've got to give you some kudos for what you did and sacrificed over the years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Meredith, we are already close to the end of our time. There is so much more in the book that people can read about and go look up. But I did want to ask you about kind of your current projects and where you are and what you're working on, because you are no longer in Texas. And I think I forgot to mention at the beginning, because our parameters, I guess, for the show, four corners. So yeah, you're in Utah now, right? And you're working on a
Correct.
new project.
I am. So yeah, my husband and I moved to Southern Utah about 9 years ago, and I'm running another book for another nonprofit animal organization. They're an international group that focuses mostly on trying to change laws to benefit animal welfare, but they also have a few sanctuaries, two in the United States and two abroad, where they are focused on, doing basically animal rescue in their communities. And this next book that I'm working on is on one of the sanctuaries that's located in Mississippi. So the manuscript is completed. It's in the copy editing stage, and we're fingers crossed, hoping to get it out sometime this fall or late at the end of the year. So I will keep you posted about that book as well.
Yes, please do. It's an animal, or animals are a topic that I am passionate about, and I have three crazy dogs of my own, and so always interested in learning more about it.
Oh, great.
Well, tell us a little bit about where people can find you online and your books, and just learn more about everything that you've been doing.
Great. Well, I do have a website, and it's meredithwargo.com. And then my book can be found anywhere on the internet at Barnes& Noble, Amazon, and I've got links to where you can purchase the book on my website as well. But basically, Amazon is probably the best bet to find it, since Amazon pretty much has everything that anybody ever needs, right? Well, I
Well,
greatly appreciate this time, and it was a pleasure to be part of your podcast. And I wish you continued success in doing what you're doing.
well, thank you. And to you as well. I appreciate you taking the time. And I will put a link to your website in the show notes for people to find you nice and easy. And yeah, just please stay in touch. I'd be happy to read more and hear more about your next project.
Great. Well, I appreciate it very, very much.